So, welcome everyone to yet another episode of Risk Grustlers, where we talk about insights from the trenches on security and risk management. This is a Black Hat special season where we're on the floor of Black Hat. I have with me Edward, who is the founder of Dropzone. So, Edward, why don't you introduce yourself and talk about your journey to building Dropzone?
Thank you for having me. My name is Edward Wu. I'm the founder and CEO of Dropzone AI. We are a Seattle-based cybersecurity startup that's building AI SOC analysts. And we have built a system that can force multiply cybersecurity teams so they can operate as if they have 10 times more members, 10 times more pairs of hands, eyes, and brains on the security team.
Would you like to talk a bit about your journey and what realizations you had that led you to build Dropzone?
Yeah, absolutely. So before founding Dropzone, I spent 8 years building network detection and response products at ActualHop Networks. And during that time, I built hundreds of behavioral detection modules that detect all sorts of different suspicious network activities and worked with a lot of different SOCs and security teams, and ultimately came away with the realization that most security teams already have too many alerts. They do not need yet another alert cannon. And this is where I decided to start Dropzone to solely focus on the automation of security alert investigations.
One of the things I'd like to talk about here, and as you go across the floor in Black Hat, every company is now an AI company. It's almost become par for the course.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to talk about AI. And different companies use AI to various extents in their product,
Mhm.
if you will. Sometimes the use cases are a thin wrapper on top of a model, sometimes it's more deep. But I think the common feature there is that there is customer data that's engaging with agents now in some shape or form. And so what we do essentially is similar to what you do, but in a GRC or compliance heavy context. So we work a lot with mid-market companies where there isn't enough compliance or risk management expertise available.
Mhm.
So our agents that we identify as Scrut teammates, essentially in a very similar fashion to yours, act as extended team members in the team, extended capacity in the team that allows them to do stuff like prioritizing alerts from various vulnerability scanners, help them figure out what, in a very contextualized manner, what their compliance activities would look like. Now, as we do that, there is a lot of data that interfaces with these agents. And one of the problems not the problems really, but one of the questions that we often ran into when we started building this was, how do we make them dependable? And this is through my multiple conversations with people on the floor, I realize this is a problem that keeps coming up again and again, where the question that is asked of vendors like us is, how are you dependable, right? And the way we see this, dependability has two components. One is, can I trust the outcome that I'm receiving from agents? An outcome could be a basic inference, an outcome could be an action, an outcome could very well be some sort of expertise or an answer, right? And the second component of dependability really is, how do I know that you as a vendor are being responsible with the information that I feed into your agent?
Yep.
And that information could be very critical.
Yep.
So would love to understand how you've dealt with this, and would be good to, for the benefit of the viewers, would be good to exchange notes on that.
So in terms of dependability, I think you highlighted two components. One is more kind of like the accuracy and the quality of the output. And then the second is more on like the security and privacy of the data. In terms of like accuracy, obviously our technology is focused on performing alert investigations. And the ultimate goal is to have a piece of software that can do as good of a job, if better job, than on alert investigations than a typical human tier one security analyst. And in order to achieve that, there's like a couple components. I would say first and foremost, as with any agentic AI systems or any products using large language models themselves ultimately are not 100% deterministic. So like one of the biggest thing is that we oftentimes educate our prospects and customers on is like the system is never going to be perfect. So it's a matter of having the system be accurate enough to add value, but at the same time having compensating controls. So when the system does make a mistake, the production system doesn't go down, nobody loses their jobs, right?
Yeah.
And there's like, we have built a couple of different mechanisms to help with that. In terms of, the overall quality of the outputs, we have devised an internal quality control program. So we actually hire expert human security analysts who sample investigations that our AI system has performed in production across our deployments, so that every single day we have an accuracy sampling. So we know, okay, how are we doing on false positives? How are we doing on false negatives? Like, are we struggling more in specific type of alerts or environments? So this kind of continuous in production quality control is vital. Because as with any AI system, the performance of an AI system is not uniform
Yeah.
across all deployments and situations. Oftentimes, AI might do a better job in the more common environments, such as those with like Splunk and Sentinel-1, and then the AI might struggle in more corner cases. And that's kind of where having a in production quality control program is vitally important, and has really helped us to up level, not only gain visibility to how our AI is doing, but also identify ways to continuously improve it.
That's actually a very interesting point. So if I just break down what you said, right? So there are two ways a classic user can seek gratification from an agentic outcome. One is potentially to establish expertise. Right? I lack internal expertise or expert capacity in the team. How do I use agents in some shape or form to generate that expertise at a fraction of a cost of a human human expert or human FTE? The other alternative is to say that I have expertise in the team, but I don't have capacity.
Yep.
So can agents take away the mundane, repetitive, relatively low cognition tasks away from me? Right? Where do you lie on the spectrum, and what's your core value communication there?
Yeah,
For us, it's very heavily indexed on the former, with the second also being in place. So would love to understand where you are on the journey.
Yeah. For us, I would say we definitely focus on the latter. Most SOCs have tier 1 analysts, tier 2 analysts, and tier 3 analysts. So for us, we're primarily focused on automating the tier 1 analysts' responsibilities, which is performing the initial triage investigation of all the alerts in the environment. So our focus primarily is on actually increasing the capacity. However, it does come a time when, for more mature organizations, in addition to additional capacity or essentially efficiency or higher efficiency, we can also start to make the team or more effective. And one example is, when you think of it, additional capacity sounds like an efficiency gain, right?
But then that capacity would never have existed in the first place, right?
Correct. And also one challenge.
So you're not replacing capacity, you're actually creating one. So
exactly. So sometimes we tell people we're like force multiplying their security budget or security headcount. Additional, because cybersecurity has historically been so under resourced, the additional capacity actually turn into efficacy. For example, most security teams are only looking at a subset of their security alerts. But now, if you have double, triple, quadruple the analytical capacity, you can look at so many more alerts that previously were just being completely ignored. So that ultimately additional capacity can actually translate to higher efficacy of the program, because now you can cover a lot more security alerts. You can, check beneath every single rock, right? So that's kind of one. And then the other component is what we have seen with regards to efficacy gains is actually response time. Like, as a human analyst, generally they get to security alerts somewhere between 30 to 90 minutes, because nobody is sitting there, refreshing their browser, waiting for an alert to show up. Like, everybody is doing something else most of the time. But again, a piece of software doesn't mind. So it's parallelizable. It can look at 50 alerts in parallel. So there's no queuing at all. So what we have seen is, for our customers, AI agents actually drastically reduce the mean time to respond, which is very valuable. A typical mean time to respond of a human-only SOC is on the order of hours. But with software, you can reduce that down to minutes. And obviously, by kind of, negating the opportunity for attackers to roam around the environment, that really drastically reduce the impact of any breaches.
That's very impressive. So when you talk about the value that your customers would typically derive from this, is it mostly, say, an MDR company that's drastically improving their gross margins through Dropzone, or is it an end user company that's basically accessing outcomes that would have been inaccessible because they can't hire so many SOC analysts.
Yep.
Which, what do you think is a primary value driver there?
Yeah, actually, for us, it's actually both. So
Okay.
we work with service providers to help them improve their margin, improve the quality of the service. And then for end users, like you said, we are giving them capabilities that they previously wouldn't be able to access. Sometimes we call it, essentially lowering the poverty line, right? Because most security teams have a lot of ideas on projects they want to embark on, but they don't have enough capacity and resource.
Get to a slightly provocative question, right? So when you talked about agents potentially automating a bunch of repetitive tasks that would otherwise have been done by level tier 1 analysts, right? So in the early, and you're one of the early entrants in the category, right? So what kind of conversations happened in the early days when you were trying to convince value? And you mentioned earlier on in the conversation that you have to set baseline expectations, that agents are not magical. Agents will make mistakes, will potentially hallucinate, and it can only get you, like, depending on your current baseline, maybe 70 to 90% there, right? So what were those conversations like? How did you manage that friction with customers? How did you educate your customers on that, on what to expect?
This is where, like, some of these, you can say, psychological or mental blocks are not unique to cybersecurity products. Like, for example, as a startup, we use Cursor extensively. And I do remember a time when I told people we're using Cursor, and they're like, hey, you're just generating more bugs. Your team will spend more time fixing bugs than actually writing, working code. I felt like a lot of these boils down to this mindset of you can have leverage, but when you have leverage, either by leveraging AI agents or additional human employees, you always give up on determinism, right? Because when, both of us are founders, we are experiencing hiring people, and I think both of us can agree is that not every direct reports of ours do everything our way, but it's okay, right? And this is kind of a mindset we have seen over time because of the popularity of, like, AI coding tools, kind of AI call center tools, automation tools, or note takers. I think more and more people are kind of learning this idea of, in order to have additional leverage, which AI or human give you, you do need to sacrifice a little bit determinism. But as long as you kind of have essentially a manager or a kind of a supervisor mindset, then you can manage the non-determinism, but still benefits tremendously from the leverage. That's why I think
that's actually a very interesting point. And if I were to sort of exchange notes here, right? So going back to the earlier point, and for us, we, like you, try to create capacity that doesn't exist for most companies through agents. We try to create that expertise within teams. And where we see most GRC programs actually failing, especially, and we sell a lot to mid-market companies that are tech first, is the last mile. Right? You could have a GRC manager that monitors a bunch of controls, does 70 plus integrations, generates multiple signals that ultimately contribute to your risk. But then who fixes them? It has to be the DevOps people, the engineers, the SREs, right? By the time it actually goes to them, they're unable to prioritize hundreds of things and they just drown in it. Or they apply their own judgment, heuristics, which may or may not move the needle for the company, right? Just like you mentioned that you could sacrifice some degree of determinism to get better outcomes in terms of prioritization or identifying what is most material. So we saw benefit to that. So, for example, agents can now create pull requests. We respect the organization's change management practices. We see a bunch of misconfigurations. We identify what's most material, and then an automated pull request gets created, which has the remediation code. This is no different from an engineering manager having to approve a pull request from a junior engineer or a mid-tenure engineer. The level of error could still exist. There is still some bit of oversight involved, which is no more or less than what you would expect from an agent. So I think that was a mindset shift that we had to sort of educate our customers on. Ultimately, you still have a junior engineer generating remediation code for you. But that engineer would probably take days. That would still have errors. There would still be a learning curve. But here's an agent doing it for you. We're not completely breaking the organization's change management practices. We're not making breaking changes to your environment unilaterally, but it's drastically reducing the need for you to have multiple engineers that are just generating remediation code for you. Right? So I think I can relate to that a lot. I think all of us are learning as we go along, but that I think has been the most material, friction mitigating conversation that we've had, that you would have had to approve somebody's PR anyway. It's not very different, right? But tell me one thing, in your case, So there's tier 1 analysts and then there's higher tier analysts,
Yep.
right? So does Dropzone essentially replace the tier 1 analysts in the loop, or is it something that's predominantly used by tier 2 analysts to carry out the first level of reconnaissance? How does it work?
Yeah.
How does the customer's journey look like?
Yeah. So generally, when we first start, the goal is to really offload the responsibility of traditional tier 1 analysts to our software. So our software is taking security alerts as input, it's autonomously performing the investigation.
But let's say you're selling to an MSSP.
Yeah.
To the MSSP's customers, the SLAs, do they remain the same? Because the customers wouldn't care about how many agents are being deployed in the background, right? Do your customers still manage like very similar SLAs for their customers? How does it work typically?
Yeah, so in terms of SLAs, actually a number of our service provider customers are leveraging our technology to drastically reduce the SLAs
Okay.
so they can be a lot more competitive. Like most MSSPs do not offer any SLA below like 30 or 60 minutes.
Okay.
Because, again, they have an army of humans somewhere that's kind of going through an alert queue. And SLAs, so they need a pretty large SLA, like 90 minutes, an hour, or 2 hours in order to be able to process the alerts in time. But with software, a lot of our service providers are actually able to reduce the SLA, so they can go in, bid on contracts and say, hey, we have 20-minute SLA. So that actually becomes a competitive advantage. But most of the time, our service provider customers, as well as enterprise customers, they are using our technology where we are taking alerts as input, we're analyzing the alerts, and then within a couple minutes, we're generating a recommended determination on whether the alert is a true positive or a false positive. And then it's generating.
Does that have an approval step beyond this point?
At this point, no. But
Okay.
what we do after this determination is we generate an investigation report.
Okay.
And then we actually post the investigation report as a comment or a case note on the alert itself.
Okay.
So that's kind of very similar to some of the AI coding tools, right? They will look at tickets in Jira and then they will be like, okay, this Jira ticket says, change the color of this button, right, in the application. And then an AI coding tool will come in and just propose a pull request or merge request on that ticket. It's kind of similar where a lot of security teams are like creating tickets for each alert.
Okay.
And what our system is doing is performing the analysis to some extent, very similar to like drafting up the pull request and then attaching it.
Or creating a heavily enriched Jira ticket that a DevOps or SRE engineer basically picks up.
Yeah. So for us, we're kind of doing the initial work for them and kind of essentially handing all the analysis and relevant metadata on a silver platter. So the human engineers or analysts can look at it and approve it. But then over time, instead of like treating our analytical outputs as drafts, as these team become more confident in our technology, they will start to
relying on it more.
And what they do is we have this notion of scope of authorization. So it's a little bit similar to like when you have a new hire on your team, you don't give that person all the keys of the kingdom, right? You give that person one key at a time, and that person has to prove him or herself. And our technology is very similar. So initially, we have no authorization. We perform an investigation, add comments. Essentially, they are like suggestions. But as our customers build confidence, then we get a little bit more authorization. Most of the time, the first authorization we get, or first expansion of the authorization, is we get to automatically close false positives. So that's where, like, when we identify an alert to be a false positive, in addition to just posting or commenting on the ticket, our product will automatically close that ticket or alert. So that's generally like the first expansion. And then as our technology becomes more trusted, and the product gets to know the customer's environment a little bit more, then some of our customers and early adopters are starting to allow our technology to conditionally perform automated containment actions. So they will say like, hey, during weekends and evenings, if you see this type of alert on this type of asset and Dropzone believes this is truly malicious, you are authorized to quarantine this particular host or, reset credentials or reset all the sessions of this particular user.
We're actually also evaluating that. So for us, our agents create remediation code.
Mhm.
It could be Python code, it could be Terraform code,
Yep.
or CloudFormation template. But so far, we've kept a human in the loop to approve that request. But for assets which are non-critical or fixes that correspond to findings that are not very critical,
Yep.
that don't have breaking changes, we also allow our agents to progressively increase the extent of autonomy. Now, that actually brings me to a question here, right? So just like you mentioned, a human employee, the longer they stay in your environment, they keep maturing. They keep becoming smarter, right? Now, if I try to decompose what becoming smarter means, it means two things. One is it becomes, and agents are also following a similar journey. Now, there are two components to this. One is when somebody spends more time in your environment, and probably over personifying agents here, but it's very easy to think of it that way. But they gain more context of your specific environment, the nuances of your specific environment, right? Which is context which is very local to a particular tenant or a particular client. But there is also a component of learning concepts which are more representative of a larger base of tenants, right? How do you take a specific situation from a particular tenant? But obviously it's data which is proprietary to them. So you create synthetic examples and use that as examples for few shot prompting or to distill smaller models. How have you seen this play out? Because in your case, there are senior tenured analysts that would actually on an ongoing basis QA the output from agents, which are working like level 1 tier 1 analysts. But there's also, you mentioned there's a dedicated QA team that's constantly working on improving the quality of output at a global level, not in a very tenant specific way. So how do you kind of see these two problems play out? How do you balance them?
I think it's not an either or, right? You kind of have to do both to be successful. So for us, the global, up leveling, we use a lot of the federated learning techniques. So very similar to how doctors use de-identified case studies to improve how they triage, diagnose different diseases.
So that's a dedicated team which is only doing research and not very client facing.
Correct. And then the other part is, and this is kind of tied back to another interesting conversation I've been having over and over again, which is a lot of people always ask us, hey, when is AI going to automate tier 2 and tier 3? So you can have an autonomous SOC or a humanless SOC. And from our perspective, it's not going to happen anytime soon, because in order to automate tier 2 and tier 3, the biggest thing is you need to make high quality decisions. And there are actually two components of a high quality decision. You have the intelligence, and then you have the business context.
And also explainability, right?
So, and what we have found is even if there's, GPT-10, that's like artificial super intelligence, that model or that system still wouldn't be able to access the full business context, because most of the business context, as you kind of alluded to, lived in people's heads. There's no API, unless maybe we get to a future where everybody is neural linked. Then maybe at that point.
Yeah, exactly. There's no clean way of codifying it as extensively as, and it's also very fluid. By the time you codify it, it's also changing, right? So
we have seen cases where like a security alert look very suspicious, and then the customer's like, hey, hold on a second, this guy actually received a text from the CFO to, there's an audit, so this guy received a text, and that's why he downloaded like 10 gigabytes of finance data from the last 3 years. I mean, there's like these kind of information are not accessible through REST APIs. So this is where, like for us, in order for our system to be effective, what we have found is regardless how good of a pre-training we do, without any adaptation to each environment, the system is at best 80%, effective. And in order to get beyond that, you really need to specialize into that environment. And there are a number of ways you could do that. You can do like feedback learning, right? Similar to how human analysts get slapped on the hand when they make a mistake, in the first couple of months. Or pat on the back when they have done a good job. Part of that is like actually getting directives. So a lot of security teams might have SOPs, or the mentor might coach the new hire, like, hey, next time you see this, you should think about X, Y, and Z, in addition to what you were looking at. And then another component is actually,
I think there are various degrees to which you can comfortably do reinforcement learnings. I mean, certain models lend themselves more, they're friendlier to RLHF kind of use cases, but I think fair, I agree with you there.
And then another component for us, like we have built in our adaptation, suite of adaptation capabilities, is actually studying. So for example, our system can connect with ticketing systems, so where it will read through all historical case notes to learn about the organizational preferences, policies, and practices. This is, again, very similar to how a human analyst, you'll be like, hey, you just started today, go back, go read alerts that the team has triaged in the last 2 weeks that, that human analysts should be able to learn a lot from that. But obviously, large language models are tremendous at reading text. So generally, our system can read through, months of tickets within an hour. And that's also, again, very helpful to kind of speed up the adaptation or organizational context gathering phase.
One thing it's interesting, and I think this is where I resonate with you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There are two almost polar narratives in the market right now when it comes to agentic use cases and the gratification that users can find from them. One is they are meant to augment the productivity of the people that are already there.
Yep.
And two is it completely eliminates or replaces the said humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because agents are so autonomous and they do
Yep.
things on their own. I think for both of us, there is a middle ground which is often ignored,
Mm-hmm.
which is for the kind of companies that we work with.
Mm-hmm.
These humans would not have existed in the first place.
Yep.
Because either their talent is not available, hard to find,
Yep.
or it's prohibitively expensive, which is the case with our customer base.
Yeah.
They couldn't hire 3 GRC analysts
Mm-hmm.
or risk analysts or security engineers costing $250K OT each.
Yeah.
So those outcomes would have been inaccessible. So the way, at least I see agents creating value, is making these kind of companies, especially in the mid-market, access security and risk outcomes that would have been otherwise inaccessible because they couldn't spend that money in the first place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we talk a lot about like lowering the cybersecurity poverty line.
Yeah.
And another thing I remember sharing with some of our like early believers, customers, and investors is Gen AI for cybersecurity is very interesting because I do believe like obviously Gen AI is going to disrupt and change how every white collar vertical works. But cybersecurity is kind of unique because I do see there's a unique win-win situation between the human workforce, human cybersecurity workforce, and AI agents. Because frankly, I mean, each of us have more than 10 years of free credit card monitoring at this point. I mean, frankly, as cyber defenders, we have been losing the last couple decades. And the need for cybersecurity capacity is so ginormous that introduction of additional AI agent-based capacity is not going to meaningfully displace existing cybersecurity workforce. But what I mean by that is certain roles, like entry-level roles, will be displaced. Like I do see a future where nobody works as a tier 1 SOC analyst anymore unless they are like in training.
Or nobody's sitting and drafting security policies
Yeah.
or just simply prioritizing from a bunch of findings.
Yeah.
Because those are rule-based activities that can be offloaded to agents.
Yeah. And this is where, but those people are not going to, lose their job, but instead they will transition to other higher value work.
More
right?
supervisory kind of work, yeah.
Yeah, like for example, for SOC, we envision SOC or alerting investigation is very reactive. It's like firefighting. You sit there, you see a fire, you go there and put it out. But actually, in security, everybody talks about shift left, right? Proactive. Any ounce of investment you make on the proactive side is worth like.
Is it still
10
sexy to
times.
call it tool shift left? It used to be a year ago.
Yeah, and this is where kind of I think one of the challenges with not being able to shift left is this lack of capacity. Like if you are not putting out fires and houses are continuously burning down, like you don't have the capacity to, design new building codes or build new automated firefighting systems, right? So this is where we have seen a lot of our early adopters and customers and service providers, like once they get the additional capacity augmentation on the response side, they are able to spend a lot more energy on the proactive side. Like for example, some of our service provider customers, they will be talking to their clients, be like, hey, yes, you hired me for 24/7 SOC, but I noticed you have 500 public facing RDP servers. Like it didn't have to be that way. I can, we can work on a security consulting project where I can help you to minimize this attack surface. And that's going to pay dividends, years down the road. So I do think like cybersecurity is quite unique in a sense that the additional capacity introduced by the large language models and Gen AI is actually not going to materially hurt the existing human workforce. In fact, it's going to make cybersecurity jobs more interesting, more intellectually challenging, more exciting because all the repetitive, mundane stuff are going to be automated by software.
And I'll take the liberty to ask a cheeky question, right?
Mhm.
Do you ever face a question around what if OpenAI does this tomorrow natively? How do you, I mean, we do face this question, right? So
Mhm.
how do you respond to that?
Frankly, we haven't received that question a lot because
Lucky.
at the end of the day, cybersecurity is a pretty specialized
Yeah.
field. Like if you look at an AI SOC analyst, in order to make it work, you need to have a tons of cybersecurity expertise. You know, the AI SOC analyst need to know how to use different cybersecurity tools and work around, unfortunately, a lot of the engineering caveats of those cybersecurity tools. So that's already like something I don't see, you know, large language model providers themselves getting into anytime soon. I don't think they want to figure out how to deal with, you know,
And
API
also, as we discussed, there's a
restrictions.
component of local context building that compounds over
Yeah.
time. And any horizontal model that sits at a place which is very distant from the
Mhm.
organization's context will not be able to access that much context which compounds over time. So while the
A-
inference can be commoditized, but that context can't be.
Absolutely. Intelligence, like good decisions require
Yeah.
both intelligence as well as context. And yes, the model providers can have potentially a lot of intelligence, but it's the context that's going to be the critical missing piece. And probably going to be a key battleground between different vendors. It might be a race on who can infer the most context, because the more context you have,
The
the
buzz
more
has now
accurate.
shifted from prompt engineering to context engineering.
Yeah,
That's a vibe, if you
yeah.
will. So
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I look forward to a day where, you know, we have AI agents kind of using all sort of different techniques to infer context, you know, reading wiki pages, interviewing people,
yeah.
like reading all Slack and email messages.
I think it's very hard to be clairvoyant even a year out. Honestly,
Mhm.
the pace of innovation is overwhelming, but it's exciting times. Just going back up the branch a bit, there were two components to dependability as we
Mhm.
discussed. One is reliability, which you
Yep.
spoke about. The other component is how do I trust
Mhm.
that basic hygiene security
Yep.
practices are in place. If I, as a customer, I'm engaging with the vendor's
Mhm.
agents, how do I know my data is being handled
Yep.
responsibly? So, did you have questions around that? How do you deal with those kind of conversations?
Yeah, unsurprisingly, I think all AI vendors are having
Oh, yes,
are
absolutely.
receiving a lot of
Yes.
these questions. I was chatting with a CISO like just last night. He shared like they are actively they are a public traded tech company, and across the entire company, they are actively evaluating over 150 Gen AI tools.
And I think there's
Uh,
never been a stronger mandate from the very top
mhm.
to actively engage with agentic systems or
Yeah.
agentic tools, or in some shape or form, just have AI somewhere in the critical, business critical workflows.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, you know, right now I think there is no gold standard for Gen AI kind of security and privacy certification. So what we have seen generally is minimally you need SOC 2, right? That covers kind of some of the basic security stuff. And then beyond that, generally what customers are looking at is first a guarantee on not like no permanent data retention and not training on customer data. At least in our experience, very, very few organizations are comfortable with vendors training models or, you know, prompting their models with their kind of proprietary data. So that's kind of number two. And then number three is strong like data isolation.
Yeah.
I think uh, even just a year ago, OpenAI had an incident where their Redis cache had a bug. So different ChatGPT users start to be able to see each other's conversations. And this is where we have identified a lot of enterprises will feel a lot more comfortable if you have stronger segmentations. Like for us at Dropzone, we use a single tenant deployment model. So every single customer has their dedicated compute storage and network. So there's no technical possibility of any cross wiring. And that kind of guarantee is very important because you don't want customer A, you know, starting to get access to customer B's SIM logs or emails and stuff like that. So I felt like these three things, you know, SOC 2, a contractual obligation of not training, and it's not only limited to the vendor itself, but all the sub processors.
Agreed. Yes.
And then number three is actually strong segmentation, so that you know an engineer couldn't make a simple mistake and then have all the customers' data kind of entangled together.
While the industry is nowhere close to being perfect or fully mature in terms of AI related security frameworks, I think the ISO 42001 is a
Hmm.
good start.
Yep.
Definitely not perfect. We have a point of view on what needs to improve,
Hmm.
uh, but definitely a good start if you're getting started. The NIST AI RMF framework is it's fairly contemporary. The OWASP Foundation is also published the top 10 LLM list, which is also a good point to start. But I think, as you rightly said, there's no the industry is still evolving.
Yeah.
But I think the way we see this, there are 2-3 things that kind of become hygiene, which are important for vendors to take care of. And one of them is, how do you govern access? What it means is that if there is a job that a human is privileged to do while engaging with a third-party system, if he or she uses an agent, that agent should be no more privileged than the user itself. They should inherit the level of access or level of privilege that the original user has. I think that's important, because otherwise agents could be used to jailbreak information, which is very bad. The second, I think, important component of having a minimum viable AI governance program in place is, there are systems where the user generates a prompt to engage with an agent system, either directly or through a third party. And I think it's important to make sure that no sensitive information is being fed. It's relatively easy to identify where there's PHI, PII, or cardholder information involved. It's a little bit more complex to automatically identify where organizations' business sensitive data or secrets are being leaked into LLMs. And there are a bunch of other complications, people using shadow AI tools as well. But the way we see this, these two are the most important things to sort of take care of. A lot of us in the industry across various solution categories have tried to address this problem in various ways. If collectively there's a lot more to be done, this would be an interesting area to watch out for. And it's also interesting to see how certain vendor security questionnaires are also evolving from more vanilla questionnaires to, they're beginning to have questions around how people govern their agentic systems. So they're becoming more nuanced. Again, a lot more to be done, but I think the industry is moving in the right direction. It's, at least I continue to be an optimist. I see strides being taken in the right direction by both vendors and buyers alike.
I think maybe one other thing I forgot is actually AI pen testing. That's depending on kind of obviously exposure or the threat model of your system. AI pen testing is also very helpful, because for certain applications, for example, us, we don't want an attacker to be able to trivially trick our system into saying certain true positives to be false positives. But I definitely agree with you. For us, we have actually seen a lot of progress being made on security questionnaires. We have seen a lot of bots being built to both answer security questionnaires as well as review security questionnaires.
Which is a bit of probably we also have that capability in the platform, but it's funny to observe, and it's actually funny to imagine a future where the questions are being asked by an agent, they're being answered by an agent. And unless the right guardrails are in place, the questions are garbage, the responses are garbage, and there's the garbage reinforcing garbage. So I think it's a bit of a radical, I don't mean to paint a dystopian view of the future, but generally speaking, I think these guardrails become increasingly important as there's agent-to-agent communication involved, and humans are kept out of the loop.
Frankly, I think we have already seen some of that, right? Like if you look at emails, I think Gmail offers AI summaries, and then helps you to write emails as well, right? So you can see a lot of the emails are already written by AI and read and summarized by AI. And then the other part is actually sales outbounding. I think there are a lot of AI SDRs companies out there where they can automate, calling prospects. And then we have also seen, Android or different phones start to add AI screening features. Right. So it's like AI calling AI as well. But I think at the end of the day, one thing I'm very sure of is the world is going to become more and more digitized. Which means the cybersecurity will continue to be even more important.
And to an earlier point you mentioned, Edward, agents are going to become smarter and more capable, but the humans in the loop are not going anywhere. They're not disappearing anytime soon. If anything, it requires more oversight, more thoughtfulness in terms of how much you can delegate to agents and how do you quality control their output. But thanks for spending time with us. Thanks for being here. It's been great talking to you. And to our viewers, thanks for watching another episode of Risk Grustlers. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.